All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks again so much for taking some time out of your day to spend working on your business instead of just working in your business, right? I think I say this almost every time, but one of the most important habits that you're going to create as a school operator is the habit of stepping away a little bit, right? And we all know this, right? We all should know this if we don't. But I think every one of us would agree that if you ever came from a competitive background, right, at all, if you've ever competed at all, one of the things I think you would recognize and agree with is if you go watch the film of the fight that you were just in, or if you go watch the video of the forums that you just ran in competition, or whatever the case might be, you'll see things there that you didn't see while you were in the middle of it, right? And the same is true in running your martial arts business. We have to force ourselves to take a step back a little bit and to measure and manage our performance at a distance in some cases. So I applaud you for taking time out of your schedule today to do that. I know how hard it is. I know how urgent the phone is when it rings, and I know how urgent the email is when it pops up, and I know how urgent your Facebook Messenger is when it makes a noise. But you've got to dedicate yourself. You've got to, block time out of your schedule to work on your business, not just being relegated to working in your business. So while people are logging on right now, if you can hear me okay, if you can hear me all right, why don't you just hit like or make a little comment or something like that, just to make sure that the audio is working okay. It looks like everything's all right, but just to double check if you could do that for me. A few quick logistics before we talk to our guest today. Number one is, if you do have any questions about anything we're talking about today, or anything specifically for Chief Instructor Nelson or myself, or any kind of questions in general, feel free to pop them in the little chat area below the video, and I'll loop back and look at those, and we can take some time to address those as we get through our time today. Second thing is, I'd like you to think about your colleagues in the martial arts industry. Okay. So take just a minute and think about other people that you know who operate schools, who own schools, who manage locations, whatever the case might be. I guess I should put my phone on mute. How do I do that? Think about other folks that you might work with. Maybe you compete with them in tournaments, or maybe they're part of your martial arts association, or perhaps you see them a couple times a year at seminars and things like that. Anybody that you think might benefit from the types of business strategies that we're teaching here, who might benefit from hearing Instructor Nelson's story, someone who might benefit from adding 10 to 35 new students a month to their school, essentially on autopilot. Anybody who you might think of that might benefit from that, go ahead and tag them. Just put the @ symbol and type their name. Tag them in this video, or share this video out to a group that maybe you're a part of, or maybe your martial arts association has a Facebook group or some community. Go ahead and share this out to that group. I'd love you to do that. It'll certainly help us, get some more exposure, but it'll also help our industry. Our industry, folks in our industry, more schools in our industry will be able to learn these sort of ethical and honest strategies to help grow their business. And, boy, does our industry need it, right? So go ahead and share this video out. Feel free. I'd love you to do that. That'd be helpful, I think, for both us and our industry. So while we're finished with logistics, let's welcome our guest. Our guest today is Instructor Chris Nelson, 5th degree black belt, and he has a really interesting story for us today. Chief Instructor Nelson opened a little martial arts school in a demographic that probably most of the people on this call, many people in our industry might agree that, really, if I really wanted to open a school, this might not be the place I would do it, right? It's a demographic that's more rural than it is suburban. The income range isn't probably what we would look for when we're targeting locations. But Chief Instructor Nelson is a great example in our industry of when you follow your passion and you apply some really strong business principles, you can make a really great living. You can make a really great business in martial arts almost anywhere. So first of all, Chief Instructor Nelson, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day today and to spend it with us and help folks sort of hear your story and learn some of the lessons that you learned along the way. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thanks for having me.
That's I know your phone's ringing off the hook and my phone's ringing off the hook. It'll be entertaining to see how often we get interrupted by the incoming prospect call. So that'll be fun. So anyway, let's start with this. As I described, Chief Instructor Nelson opened a location a couple of years ago in a little rural demographic, Eustis, Florida, a little town way outside, the suburbs of Orlando, like way outside, and has really made it work out there. And these things really take hustle, right? I mean, I've had a couple of locations myself that were in demographics that, had I to do it over again, I may do it differently. But with enough hustle and enough strategy, you can make these things really work well and really be successful. So first, let's start with this, Chief Instructor Nelson, if you could tell us a little bit about your martial arts background and what got you into the martial arts and what got you started and what that's looked like up until today.
Well, started back a long time ago, back in the 90s. I was practiced Taekwondo from probably about 12 to 18. My mom put me in. She was very supportive. She put me into martial arts. I trained for at 6 years, achieved my black belt in Taekwondo, and then went off to college. Did the college thing for a couple years, and then about 6 years later, martial arts has always been my passion. It's always been something there for my heart. And so I had the opportunity to work at a school. And so I took the opportunity and to be able to learn a lot of practice martial arts on a daily basis, which is a love and passion. So, I love it, but also learn the back end of it, which I was totally unaware of, but the business side of it and being able to learn that. And now being able to achieve one of my goals was to open one of my own locations. And about a little over 3.5 years ago, I was able to do that. And been living it ever since, enjoying it.
Right. And so exactly. And I think you're a good example, by the way, of something that in our industry, we are getting better at, maybe not as fast as I would hope, and maybe not as thoroughly as I would hope. But 25 years ago, 35 years ago, 40 years ago, we had a talent gap, right? We had a lot of very passionate martial artists who, would open schools and they'd have some students, right? And they were so passionate about what they did, they would have some students and they'd run a fair school, but we weren't attracting Harvard grads. You know what I'm saying? Our industry wasn't attracting, folks who had, gone to school, brought those marketing skills, brought those business management skills, brought those human leadership skills back into our industry. So I think you're a great example of this generation's version of the ability to do that. Right now, we have the ability to run very profitable schools where an owner can make a great living, comparable to or perhaps even better than going to the marketing agency and working on Madison Avenue, or going to one of the big Fortune 500 companies or something like that, right? So I think you're a good example of something I really hope continues to be the trajectory, and certainly I'm going to do everything I can to help that happen. But
absolutely,
I think it's very useful. Yeah. Okay. So having this passion for martial arts and having this passion for teaching and helping other students sort of led you to, looking at opening a school. Why don't you walk me through maybe the beginning of the logistics of that? So there was a location there was an area that needed a location in your view, and it's then, lease negotiations and vetting the market and stuff like that. Tell me what your initial market analysis looked like, and tell me the challenges that you knew you would have to face and what that looked like early on.
Well, again, looking at the demographics, I mean, as far as population and density, as far as area, that was obviously on the lower end of the spectrum. But there was room for growth, and I think that's what drew me to the areas, that there's potential for growth. And just like in any area and any school, it's all about how people come together in that community to make it grow. So coming out here, again, a little bit less populated, but more personal relationships, and really getting out there. So some of the things that, coming from an Orlando, really busy city, a lot of the strategies that we used over there weren't necessarily working over here, because they weren't caught up in necessarily the time. They were a little behind. They weren't, not to say that they were behind, but the marketing strategies didn't work being as effective as going out and actually having to hustle right at the beginning and just really talk to people and be able to communicate, go out and just spread the word. And it was just kind of a lot of that. And then getting into the school system, back where I was working in Orlando, it was really easy to get into the school system. Get in there, talk with the teachers and the principals. From here, we met a little resistance, but after kind of navigating and finding the right way to be able to go through the county and go through the school board, then I was able to find a way to get into each of the individual schools. So that was a big help in growing the part of the program. That in turn with being able to just get out there and communicate an event. And our area was very event coordinated, meaning that there's events always going on. And so it was just a big push at the beginning was to be able to be at every event possible, to be able to just express ours. And a lot of the events, it was free. We just had to invest time and effort into it. And that was a big start of being able to grow in that kind of area, is just kind of finding out what events are in local.
Right. Let's drill into that. There was like 6 things in there. So let's go back. Let's go back and unpack that a little bit, because I think you said 3 things in there, I think, that are really valuable for folks, regardless of where their schools are. So let's unpack that a little bit. Number 1 is this. So when everybody needs to think about this, one of my, I consider him to be a colleague. I consider him to be a contemporary, but Bill Clark. We had a conversation over dinner one time 10 years ago, and we were talking about multi-school development. We were talking about whether we should, look at owning the real estate that the school was in, or leasing, or, things like that. We were having mostly a real estate conversation. And Master Clark said something I thought that was interesting, and you just sort of underscored it in what you said. He said, well, what I always look at is, is the place I'm looking to buy, what does it look like in the next 10 years, not the last 10, right? Because if I'm going to own this real estate, am I in an up and coming area, or am I in an area that's waning, right? Am I in an area that looks good today, but the trend is down, or am I in an area that looks okay today, but the trend is up, right? And I think what you described is interesting, that everybody needs to be thinking about when you're looking at site selection for locations, whether it's, to own real estate or not, doesn't really matter. But when you're looking at area and site selection, you want to be looking at the next 5 years, next 10 years, next 20 years, as well as today, right? And so, and you said you did a lot of that, right? When you did your market analysis, you said the area is okay, but this is an area where people are moving to, not moving away from, right? Does that encapsulate what you're describing?
Absolutely. I mean, that is exactly it. And just seeing, the area grow, and a big part of that was also, commuting it. Orlando traffic is really horrible right now. So a lot of people are now starting to move out this way because, again, the commute with roads that they've built makes it easier, and again, less dense area.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors here, right? And so, I mean, part of the list, I think, for anybody looking at site selection, again, look at it through the lens of certainly what does it look like today, right? You got to survive. You got to be able to make a business work, but where's the trend? And your description just now is in addition is, what are real estate values doing right now? What are property values doing? What's the tax base look like? Something that I noticed when I was up there, I've driven around that area a few times. Something I noticed in the last couple of years is the rate of commercial construction up there is, I mean, they're building a new shopping center, a new standalone, restaurant, a new chain, whatever it is. Like every time I'm there, there's like a new building, And so I think that's definitely something that you need to be considering when looking at new site selection. So, just that, sir, is probably, a $50,000 lesson for somebody who's looking at a location. If you forget to consider that, you're making a mistake. So that was the first thing I think that you mentioned that I think we should have unpacked. The second thing was this. So because the area that you're in is slightly less densely populated, now your target radius is larger, right?
Right.
Now, some people, there are some people who like to see the obstacles, and some people who like to see the opportunities, right? And what you said is kind of casually, but I don't want anybody to miss, is you're now able, since the population is somewhat less dense, you now have a larger radius to choose from, right? A larger radius to pick from, but you also have less clutter, right? There's less clutter in the marketplace. So maybe if you could drill into that, I mean, if you're in downtown Orlando, just as an example, let's say downtown Atlanta, Georgia, just to take it out of context for a minute. Many of my close friends and colleagues have schools in Atlanta. Well, I got to tell you what, I was at a good friend of mine, Joe Corley's school, I don't know, a few years back. And if I had a dozen eggs, I could have thrown each egg in a different direction and hit a different martial arts school from where I was standing. Right? Swear to God. I
Right.
mean, in a prime demographic and area like that, I mean, there were a ton of schools in that area, and you're dealing with a different scenario, right? So unpack that, drill into that for me a little bit. What did you find to be the opportunities there, not the obstacle? What have you found to have been your ability to penetrate the market more deeply?
Absolutely. I mean, you're right. I mean, being the fact that it is, less cluttered, there's less, um, it's a little underdeveloped. I would not saying in any way that it's too underdeveloped, but less competition
Right.
for after school programs, specifically for martial arts programs. I mean, there was literally, I think I had 3 other martial arts schools. I mean, maybe not even in the same style, but just in total, that was a different martial arts school. 3 within a 5 mile radius, 6 mile radius. So by all means, first of all, that was very very little competition when it comes to that. Um, and then second is also competition with after school programs as well. If you're thinking about doing a martial arts after school program, the biggest competition that I have is with the schools,
Right.
not against anybody else.
Yeah. So less competition per population, by the way,
Right.
right? Per population. So we're not talking about, the population is so sparse and undense that there's no opportunity here. That's not what we're saying. You identified when doing the pre-market analysis a gap in the market, a population that was high enough that was being radically underserved, right?
Right.
So big deal there. Yeah, those are like buying stocks for pennies on the dollar, right? Google goes down to $20 a piece, and you don't buy some, right? So then the other thing that you mentioned again intrinsically in what you said is not only less martial arts school competition, but frankly less organized activities for children. Period.
Right.
Right. So that's, be on the lookout for that. When you're looking at new locations, when you're looking at site selection, what does that look like? Right. Are there 55 children's soccer teams and 55, after school programs, or are there maybe only a couple? Right. Like, what does that look like per population? So very, very useful strategy in that range. So you mentioned that. The third thing that you mentioned that I think is really useful for us is actually third and fourth, frankly. But let's talk about community events for a second. So again, this is now an area where somebody like you, somebody who's sharp and who could go into, can really kind of dominate an area, right?
Right.
The sophistication level of any competition that you're dealing with is probably pretty low. Certainly the density of competition you're dealing with is pretty low. So you mentioned community events. You mentioned, frankly, just hustle, right? Getting out there and making it happen. Maybe describe that to me. Describe maybe the first year of getting this thing off the ground quick. What did that take, and how did you start sort of building a local brand in that way?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I mean, our first event we weren't even open, but I got with one of the city. It was an event done by the city, and they were just trying to get out to kids in parks and recreations and trying to get people to recognize parks. And so they would have little get-togethers and have these events. And so it was, I think, a $20 investment to have a table there. I mean, by far, we weren't even open yet. We were still under construction, getting everything ready for. So we went out there again. That was the first event, and we brought home like 60 leads. I mean, just a phenomenal time. And then since then, we went over to many different events we have around, because our radius is so big that it covers several different cities, and every city does their own different types of events. So the fact that we have a larger radius meant there was more events. So we were doing an event every weekend, just every
Right.
weekend going out and setting up a table out there. A lot of them being free, just getting in and letting people know, hey, or martial arts school new to the area. We just wanted to, come on, give out some information. Is there anything we could do to help out and be part of the event? Is there anything that you need? And we came in with that. So a lot of the events, I mean, again, they were free or they were minimum cost, $20, $20, $30 here to be at an event all day. They have 60 leads. I'll pay that any day.
You think? Yeah, right. Okay. So just, two things sort of, built into what you described there. Number one is, again, some people choose to see the opportunities, and other people choose to see the obstacles. And one of the opportunities that you choose to see to this day is in slightly less population and slightly less dense population bases. There oftentimes is a higher sense of community. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
Yeah,
so if
absolutely.
you live in downtown Orlando, lots of people, they go to work, they go to their apartment, they never walk out the door. Right?
Right.
Maybe if they have a dog, they take the dog out, a couple times a day, right? But in the type of area that you're describing, in the type of slightly more rural, slightly less dense area, you oftentimes find a higher sense of community togetherness, a higher sense of community involvement, a higher sense of, in many cases, religious or sub-religious, church groups and things like that, parks and festivals and carnivals and things like that. In some cases are much more highly attended as a percentage of population and things like that. So you chose to find that opportunity, right, and leverage it well. And that's very, very, very useful if you're in that type of an area. The second part that you said, and I don't want anybody to miss this. This is big. If you're having trouble working with anybody, whether it's elementary schools or whether it's parks or communities or whatever the case might be, you mentioned something that, again, very casually, because it's just part of your modus operandi, but many folks just don't quite get this yet. It's all about what's in it for them, not what's in it for you, right?
Right.
They already know you have an agenda. I don't care who they are, right? Why are you here? Why are you talking to me? Right? You have an agenda. So the question is, what's in it for them? And your example was you're working with the county or the city on some events that they're doing. And hey, how can we help? How can we be helpful? Can we help provide the tent for this? Or maybe we can sponsor the bounce house or whatever the case might be. Have you stumbled across any particularly useful strategies like that? Or certainly just going into the whole thing with looking at it from their perspective is the most important, right? But have you stumbled across anything that's been particularly useful?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things they have an event every Friday night for the city that I'm in, Eustis, downtown Eustis. They do an event every Friday, the first Friday of every month. So they have a party, and being able to go out there and just set up a booth to say give out free water, so that people stay hydrated. One of those kind of things is just say, hey, we're gonna want to go out there and we want to provide free water for everybody. And you know what? They let us set up a table, no cost or anything like that, for that event. So that one was really worked really well for us because then we just helps us get out with the community. We're doing a service for them, and then it's kind of a local, like you were saying earlier, a lot of together. So we'll see some of the same people over and over again because of that fact that we're just building a strong community.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, I mean, something as simple as that, right? Something as simple as, hey, it's a 4th of July picnic and man, I'll bet that, it's going to be hot and the sun's going to be out. And man, what if we could just donate, the water that day? Let me go buy a couple dozen cases of water or 100 cases, whatever it is. I mean, who cares, right?
Right.
I mean, that really goes a long way. And again, any negotiation should always start in your mind with what's in it for them. WIIFM. That's what they're thinking. What's in it for me? Why should I do this? Right. So great. I think very useful lesson, about 4 of them in a row there. I think that are pretty useful. Now I want to talk about elementary schools here too, but before we do that, so I'm going to kind of encapsulate your story a little bit. You chose the location, you opened, you got the ball running. You're in about 22-ish hundred square feet.
2,100 square feet.
2,100. So you started in about 2,100 feet. And then about 18 or 20 months ago or so, started to implement this iEnroll process and have then since you've now doubled your after school program. That's just cool. That program is now grossing a little over $22,000 a month. And this is on the incline, right? This is the beginning of the curve, not the end of the curve. and you've doubled the space of the facility. You've now moved to 5,500 square feet, from 21 to 5,500 square feet. And I believe cut the rent, if I'm not mistaken, right? And are actually paying less. Yeah. And are actually paying less for rent. So, God love that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So walk me through that. Walk me through how the iEnroll process has sort of changed the paradigm for you, and what the benefit and value has been there.
Absolutely. Well, like I said before, how I got started was hitting every single event, and just getting out there, getting our name out there. And whereas that was really, started us and helped us grow, um, it also invested a lot of our time,
Right.
a lot of time and effort, because while we got out there and we didn't have to pay a lot to be out there and to be at these events, you still had to have people demand the event. And as a school owner, really that responsibility fell on me a lot of the times with my staff. So that being said, when we got the iEnroll system, um, this helped us generate just as many leads without the additional effort as or putting the manpower in. So it really saved some time to where I could still generate leads and not have to worry about sacrificing hours into the manpower and as far as going into that. And again, we still do events and we make it, but now we're able to make the events more impactful. And then instead of just doing every event, now we're able to key on certain events that are, more that draw in bigger crowds, and so that we can be more impactful at those events. Because now that we have the iEnroll system, that has helped us to where we don't have to be at every event.
Right.
And so it supplements in that area, and the fact that we are in a rural area, so there's not much to do. So a lot of people stay at home and online a lot, I think, and use that. So that's probably been a big advantage to that area, being said that everybody's just on the Facebook and they are on the iEnroll. So
yeah. So let me kind of loop around that a little bit too. So for anyone who's not familiar yet, the iEnroll process essentially is, I'd almost describe it like the new version of the Yellow Pages, right? Where this is sort of like a completely done for you marketing strategy. Like our team here will help manage your social media campaigns, ad campaigns, drive traffic to web funnels that we'll build for you, both video, audio, all sorts of different web funnels. Manage those funnels so that the leads actually get converted into a scheduled appointment to come in and see you at your school. They're much more highly qualified than just a general web lead. We put them through basically an entire process. So essentially, it's a done-for-you marketing system, right? It's a done-for-you process that drives traffic straight to your front door for you, and then helps you manage them over time. But one of the things that you mentioned was, and this is critically important, I think, for schools, especially at a transition in development, which is when you really start throwing gas on the fire and you really sort of start fueling that growth curve. Labor costs money, right?
yes.
Whether it's dollar signs, whether you're paying the people to go do the thing or not, whether they're being paid to be out in the community at these events or not, either way, it costs opportunity time and energy, right? So like you, I live in Florida, and like you, I've spent many an hour in a heavyweight uniform in July in 105-degree heat, marching in a parade, right? Or having the students at a demonstration outside, or things like that. And regardless of the return, absolutely, I'm looking for an ROI, right? But it costs energy, right? So now what you're describing is, with the iEnroll process, you have to expend much less energy, right?
Yeah.
And use that energy, focus that energy more on teaching better classes, helping the students that you have in the school, and expanding your reach in the community. So I think that that's a useful bit. The part of that I think that is really useful for everybody to be thinking about is, at some point, and the earlier you do this, the better, at some point, a school operator has to start thinking like a CEO, not just like a self-employed business person. Does that make sense? You have to be thinking like the chief executive officer of your operation, and you have to manage your team's energy. How you manage your team's energy is what, in large part, will determine the level of success that you're attaining, right? So if your staff is out there talking to one person at a time at the gas station with VIP cards, It's fine. That works. But how well are you managing their energy? What happens when they now do that for 5 hours, then come to the school to teach classes at 4 o'clock in the evening? Right. Yeah. So I think what you're describing is somewhat of a transition on that. And that's pretty damn interesting. Let's power into that a little bit. You described earlier to me that since the iEnroll process has been operating in your school for a fair number of months now, you're now finding that when you go to community events, your impact is higher because like they're seeing you everywhere, right? Maybe drill into that for me a little bit. What does that sound like? What does it seem like? How's that been working out for you?
Well, and great. I'm glad you asked. I think that, when first getting started, just getting your name out there, it's a challenge. I mean, you just, again, it's the masses. You have to get as many people. And short from putting a billboard up, we just went out there and talked to people. But through the iEnroll system, now it's on Facebook. So with technology these days, being part of groups and being able to be in there and be having our name out there, more people have seen it, so that when somebody comes in or we see somebody on the street, they're like, oh yeah, I know who you guys are, so we built our name, a lot due to iEnroll. So that helps. Or when we get referrals, like when somebody was like, oh, I was looking for a martial arts program, found you guys on the website, all of that is putting that together, and it's just becoming, we're getting higher, I don't want to say optimization, but on our search engines, I'm not 100% sure because I know the iEnroll system works, but what we're doing is it's again, our name gets out there and it's first, and it's everywhere. So more people recognize that. So
yeah, I think that's what we're seeing in a lot of areas around the country. Again, I would position what you're describing in your specific area as, again, an interesting, unique benefit of being in a slightly less densely populated area where, okay, here's the past version of this, right? Before we were able to accomplish this stuff with the iEnroll process, the previous version of what you're describing, sort of this top of mind awareness, was, me buying television infomercial time on Saturday at 9 o'clock and 9:30 every Saturday. Cost me about $1,000 a week, right? Then I bought run of the station spot, 15 and 30-second spots on television, spent about $3,000 a month to run those in every area that I was. Then we were doing direct mail campaigns every month to that, list of 5,000 of the top, demographic people in the area. Then we had radio spots that went out into the community. Then we had flyers we'd put all over the doors. And then we'd have door hangers hanging on the doors. And then we'd have rack cards at all the local businesses. And then we'd have, and then, right? So that was the version 10, 15 years ago of how do I create like a brand? How do I create a recognizable brand in a local area? And you could do it. It was damn expensive. And it took a lot of money, right? I spent more money than anybody I know on television, right? And it worked, but the downside is a lot of money. And now you can't do it today. Today, the way you buy television is so different than it was before. When I was doing it, there were more than 13 channels, but there weren't that many channels, right? We could buy television on where kids were watching cartoons on Saturday morning, and we got to almost everybody. We got to the community. Now there's like 16 cartoon channels, much less just the networks, right? So the whole dynamic on that has changed. It's essentially just moved. So now that big group is targetable on social, same group of people, right? But now we can get at them more easily. We don't have to go through the big fat cat gatekeepers anymore. We don't have to deal with Cox Cable anymore. We don't have to deal with Bright House anymore. We don't have to deal with ABC, NBC, and CBS anymore, right? Now we can kind of go directly to the customer, right where they are, right? So I think that's an interesting observation that you made. And this is a much simpler version of that, right? It's much easier to do this now than it was, 10 years ago. So that's very, very useful. The other thing that you mentioned, by the way, sir, is that you faced some headway. Again, if there's a buried lesson here, it might be choose to see the opportunities rather than the obstacles. But you had mentioned that, one of your challenges was also you guys are operating the after school program model as well.
Right.
And that accounts for about, you said just in your after school program, you're grossing about 22,000 a month. So that's
22,000. Yeah.
nothing wrong with that, right? I mean,
No,
that's
not at all.
not bad.
But
But you face some headwinds trying to penetrate elementary schools. Maybe you could kind of drill into that a little bit. What were the challenges that you faced, and what sort of path did you take to overcome those challenges, and what does that look like now?
absolutely. I think, well, first of all, I met a lot of headway as far as when we started and when we opened up. The schools weren't very, I don't want to say friendly, but they weren't just giving us many opportunities. First of all, to promote the after school program, there's only a few. There wasn't a very many opportunities like when we go out in the event and have public stuff like that. That was a lot for our traditional program, but for after school, we put out signs, trying to give out brochures and car lines, and getting asked to leave, and then coming back
Sure,
and doing it, 2 weeks later. Just trying our best to just hustle and really push it out, and getting into the school systems after about a year or so of getting with the county school board. I was able to get in and teach classes with the PE teachers, and that worked well. Like I would go in and teach a PE class, and then they would give me the opportunity to put a brochure in each child's hand, and that was really good as far as helping us get started. But we still hung around that 30 mark. We still hung around the 30 mark after 2 years. And it was really hard to push to really get, even though there wasn't a lot of competition, just being able to get our name out there. And I think getting it to the right people, that was a little bit of our challenge. So when, this past like about 18 months, we started the iEnroll system, and that really started to boost our after school program because it was directly marketed for those people that really need that. So now instead of going out and giving every parent in the car line a brochure, we were able to give a brochure to the parent that wasn't able to come in the car line, the one that was needing the after school program. And through that, again, that boosted our system. And then towards the end of last school year, we had, got it increased to 36. And then, now we're sitting at 60 after schoolers. So I really attribute a lot of that and that growth, almost that double growth from the iEnroll system, because I was able to directly put a brochure or put information into the parents that need it, not necessarily just everyone, which is what we were doing before.
Yeah, whether they're yeah, that's right. And I mean, again, so I mean, adding 3,000 square feet to the location and 12,000 a month, not a bad gig, right?
No,
not a bad deal.
no.
Not a bad deal. Very cool. So something else that you mentioned, by the way, just to sort of drill into it a little bit more, whether it's penetrating the elementary school system or anything in a martial arts business, I don't care what it is, right? I mean, I'm not sure about you, but I don't remember, with much level of clarity, much of anything being like super easy, right? Like I mean, everything is a fight, right? And either you choose to find the way to get through that obstacle or you don't, right? And I mean, whether it's getting into local elementary schools, whether it's working with other businesses that are of similar, serve similar customers, whatever the case might be, it's all about communication skills, and it's all about sort of just deciding that you're going to get it done, right? Deciding that you're not going to let that obstacle stop you. And, I don't care how many times I bang my head against this wall, I'm going to keep moving a foot down and try it again. And eventually there's a crack here somewhere, right? And to just sort of reemphasize one more time, I don't care whether it's working with other small businesses, whether it's working with the community, the county, the state, elementary schools, public or private, whatever it is. I think the second big lesson, again, that Chief Instructor Nelson mentioned today is you got to find out what's in it for them. You got to find out what their objectives are. What are they trying to accomplish? How can I be of service to them? And that then can reciprocate, to create a relationship that might last forever. Right. I just had a call about 2 weeks ago with one of the gentlemen that are running the school that I ran for many, many years over in Orange City. And to this very day, now this has been I maybe 17 years. I don't know, a long time. It's been a lot of years. They still to this day go to one of the same elementary schools, the private school that was like one of our great private schools right real close to the location. Every year they do a program there every year. And we set that relationship up, more than a dozen years ago, more than 15 years ago. And still to this day, it's going strong. So again, if you're there to be of service to them, if there's something in it for them, if there's a way that they can benefit from the relationship, then, why wouldn't they want to do it? Right. So I think that's very useful. Gosh, I think that pretty much, accomplishes all we needed to accomplish today. And any last items that you might think of that, that have been really useful to help you accomplish what you've accomplished over there?
Again, I think you hit it on the head when you were saying, instead of looking at obstacles, look for opportunities. I mean, it just continuing to push, and that there's no one answer that fits all, and there's no one solution that fits all, and then you just got to keep trying many different until you get the result you're looking for. And we all have different ideas and different goals, but with your goals in mind, and then just find out how do you achieve it, and you just gotta fight, or martial artists.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's right. I think that habit is something that for martial artists we learn it. Pardon me. We learn it in our martial arts training, and then my premise is, for some reason, I don't know why that is, but for some reason, the minute we sign a lease, right, it's like there's something in the ink, and the second the ink dries on the lease, we forget a bunch of the lessons that we learned as we were earning our black belt. One of the lessons that we forget, in my view, as an industry, one of the lessons that we forget is that of testing, experimenting, right? Where when you're in a fight, when you're learning to be a competitor, whether it's whatever type of competition you're doing, you try things, right? You come up with a new combination, and you go out into the match and you try it and you see how it works. And sometimes it doesn't work at all the first time you try it. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean the combination doesn't work. It just means at that particular distance, at that particular angle, in that particular fight, that combination didn't work the way you wanted it to. So how can you change your approach, right? So that process of testing and then measuring the results of the test are critically important skills, I think, that unfortunately too much of our industry kind of forgets about, and we sort of paint with a broad brush and we say, well, that doesn't work, we're never going to do that again. Well, maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. But what you really learned was, under those conditions, the result you got was X. Might not have been the result you wanted, but that was the result you got. Where should we look? Should we look at the approach? Should we look at the technique itself? What should we be looking at here, right? So I think that's a very, very, very useful habit to create. And again, one of the things that we've done a lot with this iEnroll process is we test everything. We're testing the landing page, the video on the landing page, if the video's on the left or if the video's on the right, if the form is above or if the form is below, if the form is on the left or if the form is on the right. We're testing the font that we're using on the page. We're testing, the copy in the ad. Should this word be in capitals or not in capitals? We're testing this picture versus that picture, this image versus that image, blue versus green, right? So we're operating a platform now where we have the ability to measure these results. And I think we would all agree as martial artists, the guy that I fear to compete with the most, to compete against the most, is the guy who has tried a lot of stuff, but has figured out 3 or 4 things that work for him all the time, right? He's tough, man, because he's so good at executing that strategy, they just can't get out of the way, right? And so I think that's one of the things that I'm pretty proud that we're accomplishing over here with that process. So again, Chief Instructor Nelson, thank you again so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I think on my sheet, there's 7 big lessons here that folks should take away from this, that, especially when it comes to new site selection, when it comes to, penetrating elementary schools, when it comes to, frankly, just hustling your butt off and making it work in a school, some big rocks they can take home with them and use today. So thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you, Master Monroy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. And again, thank everybody else for taking the time today to join us. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions or anything that you'd like us to address, again, just pop it in the chat area below. I'll be happy to do that for you. And if you want more information about sort of delegating some of those marketing and technical challenges to my team here in Orlando, I'd be happy to do that for you. Happy to talk to you about that. Just go to iEnrollstudents.com. That's the letter I, iEnrollstudents.com. And our team here can walk you through what that looks like and the types of results you should expect to see in your school. And I look forward to speaking to anybody about that. So thanks again so much, everybody. Speak to you again soon. Bye, everybody.